It had been 6 years since I married Mark, and somewhere in those years, I forgot what it felt like to be seen. We lived in a quiet suburb, the kind where lawns are trimmed and silences echo longer than they should. Mark worked late most nights. At first I understood. Deadlines, clients, responsibility. But lately, his words had been replaced with nods, his touch with distance. I learned to smile through the absence. Jake arrived on a humid Thursday afternoon, Mark's son from his first marriage. He was supposed to stay the summer while he took online classes. I hadn't seen him in nearly 2 years. He'd grown, taller, broader in the shoulders, but quieter. His eyes had aged in ways I couldn't quite place. The first time we were alone was in the garage. I heard something crash, glass or metal. I found him surrounded by scattered cans of paint thinner and rusted tools. His arm was smeared with dirt, sweat clinging to his brow. I was trying to make space, he muttered, embarrassed. I grabbed a cloth, knelt beside him and helped clean up. We didn't talk much. Our hands brushed once. I remember that part more clearly than I should. That evening, Mark came home late again. Jake and I had eaten already. He stayed in the living room while I cleared the plates. I glanced over once. He was watching something on his phone. Earbuds. But when I looked again, he was looking at me. I started noticing things, like how he moved with a kind of quiet restraint, how he always offered to help without needing to be asked. There was no tension, not yet, just awareness. I'd catch myself fixing my hair before walking into a room where he was. I didn't tell myself why. 3 days later, he was back in the garage, this time scrubbing oil stains from the floor. I brought him water, told him he didn't need to work so hard. Just passing time, he said, shrugging. I offered to help again. He refused, gently. I stayed anyway. I asked him how school was going. He said it was fine. Then nothing. He was never rude, just contained. I asked if he missed his mum. He paused, looked at me for a beat too long, then looked away. She's different now, he said. Distant. I didn't press. That night, I laid in bed beside Mark, wide awake. He had turned away from me hours ago, already snoring softly. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about Jake's hands, the curve of his shoulders, the way he avoided eye contact when I touched his arm. I shouldn't have remembered any of it. But I did. A week passed. We settled into a routine. Mark left, before sunrise. Jake studied during the day. I cooked, cleaned, filled empty hours. Sometimes I'd see Jake through the window, mowing the lawn or organising the shed. Always working, always avoiding stillness. I understood that. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was charged, not with anything spoken, but something sensed, something forming quietly beneath shared moments, half glances, unsaid things. 1. Afternoon, I dropped a jar of pasta sauce in the kitchen. It shattered. Jake was upstairs but came running when he heard it. He didn't ask questions, just grabbed a towel and helped me clean. We were both on our knees, wiping red from tile. I laughed nervously. Looks like a murder scene, I said. He smiled, just barely. I watched him stand and toss the towel into the laundry bin. The muscles in his back shifted beneath his shirt. I swallowed hard and looked away. Later that evening, I caught my reflection in the oven door, flushed cheeks, collarbone exposed. I hadn't worn that top in months. I didn't know who I was dressing for anymore. I told myself it was for me. But I knew better. I started to dread and crave the silence in equal measure, the spaces where I could feel something again, where someone noticed when I walked into a room, where someone's eyes hesitated on me, even if they looked away too. Soon, I told myself nothing had happened. I told myself nothing would, but I was already lying. Mark had started coming home even later. Sometimes he didn't come home at all, just sent a brief text, staying at the office. No explanation, no apology. I stopped asking. It became normal, to eat dinner with Jake instead. Most nights it was quiet. He'd finish eating, thank me politely, then go back upstairs. One evening, I cooked too much. Mark had promised to be home but didn't show. I offered Jake seconds. He helped me clean the kitchen instead. I handed him a dish towel. Our hands touched again. He didn't flinch this time. Neither did I. While drying plates, he asked, "Do you ever miss your old life?" The question caught me off guard. "Sometimes," I said, "but it wasn't perfect either." He nodded, like he understood something unspoken. I asked about his mum again. He said she stopped calling, that his dad barely talked to him either. "Feels like I'm always just in the way," he said. I didn't have a response, only the quiet between us. I noticed his looks were lingering longer. Not obvious, careful, but I saw them. Sometimes when I walked past in a sundress, or when I leaned over the sink, and I didn't correct him, I didn't move differently, I let it happen. Maybe I even invited it. He started working on the backyard shed, said it gave him something to do. I watched from the kitchen window. His shirt hung on a branch, sweat lined his chest. His arms tensed as he hammered something into the wall. I shouldn't have stared, but I did. When I brought him water, he took it and sat on the step. "You don't have to keep checking on me," he said. "I don't mind," I replied. He drank slowly, jaw tight. I noticed the scrape on his forearm from the other day. "You should let me clean that," I said. He said nothing, just nodded slightly. I started leaving my bedroom door open more often, just slightly ajar. I told myself it was to let air in, but the part of me that wanted to be seen, it knew better. Some nights, I thought I heard him pause outside. Other nights I wished he would. Mark noticed nothing. He started sleeping on the couch after late nights, said he didn't want to wake me. I didn't ask who he was texting when he smiled at his phone. I didn't want to know. My resentment grew sharper, not because he stopped loving me, but because he stopped noticing I was still there. One afternoon, Jake asked if I could help hold the ladder while he replaced some bulbs outside. I steadied it as he climbed. The sun hit his skin. I looked up and he looked down. For a second too long. When he climbed down, he wiped his forehead and thanked me. I said, "You're doing a lot for this house." He shrugged. "You keep it warm. Feels like it deserves it." I don't know if he meant it that way, but my stomach fluttered like he did. I started to feel guilty for how much I noticed him. The way he smelled faintly of cedar, how he held his breath when standing. Too close. I told myself he was just being polite. But there was a moment, when I bent down to grab something from the cupboard and turned to see him behind me, that nothing about it felt polite anymore. The lines had not been crossed yet, but they had been drawn. Subtle, invisible, but real. Every look, every shared moment, was a step closer to something neither of us had said aloud. And in that silence, something started to grow, dangerous, slow, and undeniable. The gutters were overflowing again after the storm. Jake climbed up without asking, dragging a bucket and gloves. I watched from the doorway for a while before stepping out. "You're going to hurt yourself," I said. He looked down, smiled faintly. "I've got it." A moment later, his foot slipped. He caught himself but scraped his arm against the shingles. I rushed over as he jumped down, shaking it off like it was nothing. "You're bleeding," I said. He tried to brush it away. I didn't let him. Inside, I cleaned the wound. My hands were steady, but everything else inside me wasn't. He watched me work, eyes unreadable, lips pressed tight. I dabbed the cut with a cloth. His jaw clenched. I should have pulled away. I didn't. When I looked up, our faces were close. He didn't move. I didn't either. The air between us changed, thicker, charged. I felt the moment pass between us, like a current. Then we kissed. It started hesitant, like we were both unsure of what we were doing, but the hesitation vanished quickly. Weeks of glances, silences, the tension we both pretended not to feel, it all broke at once. I felt his hands on my waist. I don't remember how we got to my room. I only remember how quiet everything became. The world stopped moving. I stopped thinking. When it was over, I lay there staring at the ceiling, my breath still uneven. He didn't say a word. Neither did I. It wasn't passion. It was something more dangerous, something I had no name for. I reached for his hand. He pulled it away. He got dressed in silence, then left the room. I listened to his footsteps down the hallway. My heart didn't slow down until I couldn't hear him anymore. The guilt hit hard, but not enough to make me feel clean. My body still remembered him, his warmth, the way he hesitated like he knew it was wrong but wanted it anyway. That night, I couldn't sleep. I listened to the creaks of the floorboards, hoping he'd knock. He didn't. I woke up early, made coffee, tried to pretend nothing had changed. But I couldn't. When I passed him in the hallway, he didn't meet my eyes. He muttered a quiet good morning and kept walking. I stood there, holding my breath, feeling the weight of a silence that now meant something else. I kept playing it back, every moment, every decision. The way he touched me like he'd imagined it before, the way I didn't stop him. I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and I didn't know what scared me more, the act itself or how badly I wanted it to happen again. The next morning, Jake barely looked at me. He sat at the kitchen table, ate in silence, then left his plate in the sink without a word. I stood there staring at the half-empty coffee pot, not knowing what I expected him to say. He didn't say anything. Mark came home early that evening. He brought flowers, tulips, said he missed me. I didn't know how to respond. It felt like a joke, only no one was laughing. He kissed my cheek and talked about taking a weekend trip together. I nodded. I didn't mean it. Jake stayed in his room most of the day. We didn't speak. Every time I passed by, I wondered if he was thinking about it too. About me. About what we'd done. But he never gave any sign. No glance, no hesitation, just distance. 3 days later, he told Mark he was heading back to campus early. Said he wanted to focus. Said the house felt too small. I pretended to be surprised. Mark offered to drive him. Jake declined. Before he left, he caught me alone for a moment near the stairs. No words, just a look. No anger, no sadness, just something final. It was over and we both knew it. At dinner that night, we sat like a family. Mark talked about work. I smiled at the right times. Jake picked at his food. When he finished, he thanked me again. His voice calm, practiced. Not cold, just done. After he left, I stood in the laundry room and stared at the spot where he had dropped his towel days earlier. It was still there, barely folded. I picked it up. It smelled like detergent and something else I couldn't name. I held it too long. Mark wrapped his arms around me that night, told me he missed how close we used to be. I nodded again, said maybe things could feel normal soon, but nothing about me felt normal anymore. I thought about calling Jake, about writing something I'd never send, but there was nothing left to say. We had both chosen silence. I didn't regret it the way I thought I would. That's what scared me most.